It has been 4 years since Steve stopped coming back to our house. Even during this year's New Year's holiday, he didn't even contact me. I went alone to a nearby church for New Year's Day service. What I saw there was a family that looked incredibly close-knit, clearly enjoying each other's company. A family I could never compete with. Steve, that family over there, they look like the happiest family together, right? So, you must have someone else now besides me. I wish you all the best.
No, that's not it. There's a deep reason behind this. Please, just hear me out.
From this point, what could he possibly explain? Looking back, I think our failure to seriously discuss having children was the cause. We were too focused on our jobs and never really talked about it. But for him to go and have a child elsewhere without telling me, it felt like too much. I thought about it and I decided to leave the place. Tears wouldn't stop and anger built up inside me. That's right. I need to apologize to Michelle. She had warned me about Steve's cheating so many times. I was the one who refused to listen. With that thought, I quickly headed to Michelle's house. I'm Susan Miller. I'm 35 years old, and I'm the manufacturing manager at a sock production company. The company I work for is a family-owned business. Since my father is the president now, I'll eventually have to take over the company. I actually have a sister, Michelle, who didn't join the company because she wanted to open her own store. She's already married and moved out. That's why I've been working hard, focusing on the business as the successor to our company since I was young. But even I, who was always focused on my work, started noticing a man in my late 20s. This man was Steve, a delivery driver for our company's products. Steve, who was my age, would always smile and greet me first whenever he came to the company. Our employees started teasing me, saying, "Steve's got a thing for you, doesn't he?" So I began to think about him more. He was the picture of a charming young man. I had heard he didn't have a girlfriend, but I never thought someone like him would be interested in someone like me, sweating it out at the factory. I thought that was the case, but to my surprise, Steve was the one who approached me. One day, after returning from a business trip, Steve spoke to me outside the office.
Susan, if you're free, would you like to have dinner with me sometime?
I was so happy when he invited me, and after we had dinner, he asked me out. We started dating, and by the time I was 30, we got married. Since I was the heir to the family business, Steve came in as my adopted husband. He was a great, understanding partner, always helping out with household chores. Because of that, I was able to focus on work without any worries after we got married. Steve wasn't just kind and helpful with the housework, but he also worked hard at his job in the delivery business. Our employees would tell us we were an ideal couple, both continuing to pursue our individual careers, and I was genuinely happy with our marriage. But a year after we got married, an unexpected change occurred in our happy days. This was about 4 years ago. When the world went into lockdown due to the pandemic, many people started working remotely and staying indoors. Steve, with a serious expression, told me,
I'm sorry, Susan. Lately, the deliveries for online shopping have increased, and I've been getting busier. I won't have enough time for commuting, so I'll need to stay at the company more often from now on.
I hesitated at this sudden announcement, but I accepted it, understanding the situation. Well, our company's products are increasing for online sales too. I guess things will be tough for you. I'm fine, but don't push yourself too hard.
Thank you. I'll try to find time to come home whenever I can. I know the company's busy for you too, and I'm sorry for the inconvenience.
Oh, even if Steve's not here, I can manage the housework just fine. I had relied too much on Steve until then, but I didn't want to cause him any extra worry, so I decided I needed to do my best as well. So, after Steve started staying at the company more often, I threw myself into balancing work and household chores. Because of that, I became so pressed for time that I often ended up not contacting Steve. Still, in the beginning, Steve would frequently call or text me, and there were still many days when he would come home. But over the course of a year, that frequency started to decrease, and after 2 or 3 years, even when I reached out, I wouldn't get any response. He only came home during the first year for holidays like Christmas and New Year's. And now, Steve has completely cut off contact. My parents even started worrying, asking if everything was all right. My mother said that if only we had a child, it would have been better. And that's when I had an epiphany. That's right. Maybe it's because I've been so consumed by work that I didn't pay enough attention to Steve. As a couple, we should have discussed having children properly. If the gap between us grew because of that, I at least want to meet Steve and apologize. But Steve hasn't come home, nor has he sent me a single message. Could it really be that I upset him so much? Feeling anxious, I went to Michelle for advice. Michelle has been married for 10 years now, so she's an expert in home life. That's why I often turn to her when I'm in a bind. I started to explain everything that had happened with Steve over the last 4 years, but for some reason, the moment I mentioned his name, Michelle's expression changed. Michelle, what's wrong?
Just keep talking. You'll see.
With her urging, I continued. About 4 years ago, Steve started staying at the company because work got busy. But recently, even though things should have settled down, he hasn't been coming home and he stopped contacting me. I'm worried something's happened.
Did you actually confirm that Steve was staying at the company?
Michelle responded in a stern tone. What do you mean? Are you saying I need to confirm if Steve is really staying at the company? She sighed, as if she couldn't believe I hadn't figured it out. Was she trying to suggest that Steve was lying? Her attitude made me feel irritated, and I snapped back. Michelle, do you suspect Steve of something? You don't think he's cheating on me behind my back, do you? There's no way Steve, who's serious and kind, would deceive me. Then Michelle seemed to prepare to confess something she had been keeping from me.
You know, I didn't want to hurt you, so I kept quiet, thinking you wouldn't understand. But
she then started telling me what she had seen 4 years ago. At that time, Steve, who was delivering products to Michelle's shop, was seen multiple times getting close with a female employee in her first year after high school behind the store. The female employee's name was Emily Anderson. At first, Michelle didn't believe it, but over time, it seemed like they were starting to pay attention to each other. Michelle once confronted Steve about it, but he brushed it off, saying, "I'm married, that's impossible. You're just overthinking it." Then, shortly after that, Emily left the company. When she resigned, Michelle tried to ask her about her relationship with Steve, but Emily deflected with, "What are you talking about?" To cover up the situation, Emily claimed that she had to leave to take care of a parent who was seriously ill, and Michelle couldn't get any clear answers about Steve. Even after hearing all of this, I couldn't bring myself to believe Michelle. Emily must have been uncomfortable with the accusations, and I couldn't blame her for feeling that way. But still, Michelle was suspicious of the relationship between Steve and Emily, though her evidence was vague. What upset me more than anything was how quickly Michelle had jumped to conclusions just based on a vague feeling. Michelle, I really don't like how you always suspect people so quickly. If you're going to say things like that, I shouldn't have come to you for advice in the first place. I'm sure Steve has other reasons for not being in contact.
Oh, really? Then why don't you go find out for yourself? If he's too busy with work, I'm sure he could still make some time for you, don't you think?
Michelle snapped back, irritated by my response. Even if she hadn't said that, I could have just contacted the company myself. I left the conversation in silence, showing my frustration. There's no way Steve would be cheating. I contacted the company, and while they were too busy to give me many details, they assured me that Steve was still working hard. Sure enough, Michelle must have been overthinking it. However, even during this year's New Year's holiday, Steve didn't come home. I waited until the third day of the new year, but when nothing changed, I decided to go alone to the New Year's service at a nearby church. Fortunately, it was Saturday, so there were still a few visitors coming to the church. Then I saw a man walking toward me, holding hands with a boy who looked about 3 years old, both looking very happy.
Daddy, hurry up. Buy me cotton candy.
The father, being pulled by his energetic son, was walking toward me. It was such a heartwarming scene to watch. But when I looked closely at the father's face, I was shocked to realize that it was Steve. Steve? I couldn't help but shout out loud, and as soon as Steve saw me, the smile he had on his face instantly disappeared, replaced by a pale expression.
Susan, what are you doing here?
Why? More importantly, that child just called you Daddy. When I asked, Steve immediately looked away. Then, behind him, I saw a young woman holding a newborn baby, dressed in a white baby dress.
Steve? What's going on? Is she someone you know?
Well, she's a distant relative. Her name's Emily. Sorry, could you take John and go ahead without us?
Let's go, Mama.
The boy, John, was calling the woman holding the baby Mama. She looked to be around 23 years old. Steve called her Emily. That was the name of the female employee Michelle had mentioned. When I did the math, the ages matched. The baby she was holding seemed to be their second child. Could this child also be Steve's? My mind went blank. Emily, with John in tow, continued walking ahead.
Once Lucy's christening is over, how about we all go out to eat?
Yeah. I want the hamburgers Daddy likes.
Daddy sure does loves hamburgers, doesn't he?
They were chatting happily as they walked. I knew Steve loved hamburgers. From the conversation, it was clear that the children were definitely Steve's. This meant that, despite still being married to me, Steve had an affair with Emily. Once Emily walked away with the children, Steve looked at me with an awkward expression. He was probably thinking about how to explain himself. Without saying a word, Steve just stood there, and I expressed my honest feelings. Steve, that family over there with you looks like a happy family. So you must have someone else now besides me. I wish you happiness. Right. It was clear that they looked like a close-knit family. A family I could never compete with. But even at this point, Steve started making excuses.
No, that's not it. There's a deep reason behind this. Please, just hear me out.
Oh, why bother explaining now? More importantly, your girlfriend and kids are waiting for you. Isn't today the important second shrine visit for your child? Go on ahead. I said those words and left the place in a hurry. I walked quickly but aimlessly with no particular place to go. Tears kept flowing from my eyes. Looking back, I think it was our failure to focus on starting a family because we were too caught up in our work that caused all of this. But for him to go and have children with someone else, it was too cruel. Anger welled up inside me, and I stopped in my tracks. That's right. I should apologize to Michelle. She warned me so many times about Steve's affair, and it was my fault for not listening. With that thought in mind, I headed straight to Michelle's place. When I arrived, her shop was open, and there were a few customers. However, when Michelle saw me standing there with a tearful face, she quickly came out to meet me.
What's wrong, Susan?
Michelle, I'm so sorry. With tears streaming down my face, I collapsed on the ground and started crying. Michelle gently rubbed my back in concern.
Don't sit there like that. Come inside.
She wrapped her arm around me and guided me into the shop. There were a few customers, but Michelle left the shop in the hands of the other staff and led me to the back. I'm really sorry. If only I had listened to you and taken your warnings seriously.
About Steve, right? It's okay. Just take your time and tell me everything.
I calmed myself with the tea Michelle made and began to explain what had happened. Even Michelle, hearing the story, frowned in disbelief.
I had a feeling something was off with those two, but I never imagined they had 2 kids together. This is something I can't forgive.
She said this with a fierce look and then pulled a green paper from a drawer. Michelle, is that?
Yes, it's the divorce papers. I thought Steve's affair would come to light eventually, so I prepared them ahead of time. Just fill in your section.
I was shocked to find that she had prepared this in advance. At this point, I realized there was no turning back, and without hesitation, I signed the divorce papers.
Okay, let's go.
Go where? Michelle suddenly stood up with determination. She quickly put the signed divorce papers into her bag and, without a word, grabbed my arm and pulled me outside. Hey, where are we going now?
Just follow me, you'll see.
It was already past 10 p.m. At this hour, I was led to an apartment.
Okay, you stay hidden for now and watch from the shadows. Don't show yourself until I give you the signal.
Wait, okay, got it. It seemed like Michelle was planning something, sending me video calls through a messaging app to update me on what was happening inside. What on earth was she about to do? While I was wondering, Michelle rang the intercom at apartment 3 on the first floor. From inside, a young woman's voice answered, "Hello?" But no way. Who is it?
Emily, long time no see. Do you remember who I am?
Wow, manager.
It was definitely Emily's voice, the same woman I had seen at the shrine earlier today. Emily hesitantly asked Michelle,
What can I do for you?
Just open the door. I've brought you something good.
could something good be referring to the divorce papers? After Michelle said that, Emily, with a suspicious look on her face, slowly opened the door. At that moment, Michelle slipped inside and called out loudly,
Steve, I know you're in there.
Michelle's voice caused John to come running toward her. Since they had said they were going to eat out after the christening, it seemed that John had just gotten home and was still awake. But when John saw a stranger enter the house, he looked confused.
Who are you?
Michelle petted John's head and spoke in a cheerful tone, charming him.
Wow, thank you for the warm welcome. What a good boy you are. I'm your dad's sister. Is your dad home?
Yeah, he's here. Daddy, it's your sister.
As expected, Michelle, with years of experience in customer service, knew how to handle children well. John, fully trusting Michelle, called for Steve without hesitation. At this point, Steve had no choice but to come out. He reluctantly peeked his head out from the back, looking displeased.
Geez, I can never win against Michelle. But how did you know I was here?
How do you think? I heard everything. You haven't even gotten a divorce, yet you've had 2 kids with Emily. What the hell is going on?
From the flow of the conversation, it seemed like this was Emily's place. And for the past 4 years, when Steve had hardly come home, it appeared he had been staying here. Despite being overwhelmed by Michelle's shouting, Steve tried to come up with some excuse.
Well, there's a reason for all of this.
I don't care what the reason is. The fact is, Steve, you're at Emily's place and being called daddy by the kids. That's undeniable. So no more excuses. Sign this right now.
Michelle thrust the divorce papers I had filled out earlier in front of Steve. Steve looked at them with a troubled expression.
Please stop talking about this in front of the kid.
Then let's go outside. If you don't listen, I'm not moving from here.
With a glare, Michelle spoke firmly, and Steve, looking scared, stepped outside. But why was he hesitating to divorce, especially with children involved? Michelle seemed to wonder the same thing and immediately asked him,
Steve, why are you so against divorcing? There's no child between you and Susan, so why not just end it?
I don't want a divorce. Emily is Emily, but Susan is still my wife.
What is he saying? If that's the case, what is he planning to do with the children he had with Emily? Is he going to raise them as the mistress's kids forever? I couldn't make sense of Steve's thinking at all. Michelle, still fuming, shouted at him again.
What? That reasoning makes no sense. Stop dreaming and just sign the damn divorce papers.
No way. If I do that, my position will be ruined.
Your position?
Michelle, clearly at a loss for words, was struggling to understand Steve's reasoning. Then she turned to me, beckoning me over. Looks like it's time for me to step in. Steve, please, I don't want to be married to you anymore.
Susan, why are you here?
Steve, surprised, looked at me as I stepped out from behind the corner. Behind him, Emily appeared. Steve, I'm asking you too. I can't take this anymore. You said you didn't want to lose your position as the son-in-law of Miller Corporation, so I've been putting up with it. I thought just being with you would make me happy, but now I can't stand it anymore, especially for John and Lucy's sake. Emily spoke with tears in her eyes, and both Michelle and I couldn't help but exclaim, "Huh? Steve, don't tell me you married me for the money?"
Oh no. It's just that all my friends said they struggled financially after they got married. I mean, money's necessary for living.
I was dumbfounded by Steve's childish reasoning. Was the deep reason just that he wanted money from me while being with Emily emotionally? It made no sense at all. Then Michelle exploded with anger.
You Don't you dare look down on Susan. I won't forgive you. Now, sign it, or I'll seriously get mad. And what about you, Emily? Are you just going to let him do whatever he wants, thinking it's fine as long as you're together? What kind of future are you setting up for those kids?
Oh, Michelle. Okay, I'll sign it. I'll sign the divorce papers, so please, don't be so mad.
Steve, completely overwhelmed by Michelle's fury, quickly agreed. Emily, scared, clung to Steve's arm.
I'm sorry. I love Steve, and I just wanted to be with him.
Even high school couples today wouldn't act so recklessly, following their emotions without thinking of the consequences. Anyway, after much effort, I finally managed to get Steve to sign the divorce papers. As for the alimony and other matters related to the affair, I decided to consult with a lawyer later, and I immediately submitted the divorce papers the next morning. A little while later, Steve showed up at our company. He started yelling loudly at the entrance.
Is Susan here? What the hell did you do? You've ruined my life, Susan.
The loud noise, louder than the factory machines, made me and the employees come to the reception area. Some of them looked around with puzzled expressions, clearly wondering what was going on. I approached Steve and asked him what was happening.
Don't play dumb. You reported to my company that I've been cheating for the last 4 years, right? Then the president got mad and fired me. You know how strict our company is with these things, right?
Well, I suppose no company would overlook issues involving an employee's personal life. But hearing Steve blame me as if I had betrayed him, I sighed in disbelief. Hey, you didn't report to the company that you had a new family after your divorce. There are procedures for insurance and benefits when you have children. Because you didn't say anything, the president contacted me directly to ask what happened. What else was I supposed to do but tell the truth? Why didn't you just say it yourself? When I confronted him, Steve mumbled his response.
Well, if I said anything, they would find out I've been cheating for 4 years.
Everyone at the company burst into laughter at his ridiculous reasoning. It was only a matter of time before it all came out, and he was bound to get fired. Steve had worked for a shipping company that was one of our business partners, so I had a long relationship with the president. If he made me, the heir to a key partner company, cry, the president couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Steve didn't even seem to understand his own position. Normally, he should have known that acting impulsively would lead to consequences. But instead, Steve kept complaining to me.
Because of you, I lost my job, and when I tried to turn to my parents for help, you told them about my affair. My dad is furious. He won't even let me cross the threshold. Even if I show him my kids, he won't listen to me.
My ex-father-in-law was a serious, old-fashioned man. When I went to inform him about the divorce and thank him for everything, the whole extended family happened to be gathered, so everyone found out. My ex-father-in-law just stood there, his face bright red, arms crossed, not saying a word. My ex-mother-in-law, crying, apologized over and over for her son's behavior. Many of the relatives, like my ex-father-in-law, were firm and didn't tolerate dishonesty. They all said things like, "We won't forgive this," and "Steve is out of the family," insulting him in front of everyone. At that point, Steve couldn't rely on his family anymore. But that wasn't the end of it. Desperate, Steve's family went to Emily's parents' house, hoping to turn to them for help. But when they got there, Emily's father, a stubborn man who fit the stereotype of a tough father, was waiting for them, looking like a monster. From what Michelle told me, Emily's parents had come to visit the store when Emily decided to work there. They were familiar with Michelle, so Michelle had already informed them about Steve and Emily's affair, including the fact that they had 2 kids. So, when Steve faced Emily's father, he was scolded severely as expected.
Emily's dad told me he wouldn't let me marry his daughter, and now I've been separated from Emily and the kids. I've lost everything.
In the end, Steve paid me $20,000 in alimony, got fired from his job, and was abandoned by his parents, relatives, and even the woman he loved and his children. Looking at me with tear-filled eyes, Steve asked in a pleading tone, "So, you've come all this way, and now what do you want me to do?"
Well, now that everything's ruined, I can't live without you. That's only natural, right? You made me lose everything, so you need to take responsibility.
Steve's selfish reasoning made everyone around us burst into laughter once again.
Stop acting like a child.
How low can you go, blaming others when your own affair ruined your life?
I thought back to when Steve was kind and sweet shortly after we got married. But maybe back then, he was only being nice because he was happy to marry the heir to a company. Realizing that, I firmly said, "I told you I'd have nothing to do with you from now on. So no matter how hard you try, I'm not getting back together with you. If you keep bothering me like this, I'll call the police."
The police? Why?
Steve, sweating nervously, was flustered while people around us commented,
Well, stalking is a serious crime.
This is totally a case of being caught in the act, right? Just give it up, you idiot.
Huh, I don't want that.
Realizing how bad the situation was, Steve quickly ran off. Our company had a surprising number of strong-willed employees, so after being scolded like that, I figured Steve wouldn't show up here again. To make sure Steve didn't keep bothering me, I canceled my old phone and got a new one, completely cutting him off. Now I could ignore his existence forever. I also moved back to my parents' house, fully on defense mode, and felt a bit of relief. The next update I got on Steve's situation came from Michelle. Apparently, Emily, who was supposed to have returned to her parents' house with the children, had left the kids there and gone back to Steve alone. She then appeared at Michelle's shop, asking if she could work there again. When Michelle asked why she had returned without the children, Emily confessed that she didn't want to be apart from Steve. When she left her parents' house, her father had strongly opposed it, telling her that if she really wanted to be with Steve, she had to leave the kids behind. It made sense. There was no way a mother who couldn't even let go of a man be able to properly raise children. It seemed that her parents had decided they would raise the kids themselves rather than entrusting them to Emily. But how far was Emily willing to go, drowning in her love? It felt like when she begged Steve to divorce me, she just wanted him to sever ties with me as quickly as possible. Using her children to keep the man she loved was the lowest form of parenting. Of course, Michelle turned Emily away, saying she couldn't hire her. However, it seemed that Emily had a good reputation with nearby shops when she worked at Michelle's store, and after asking around, she somehow found another place to work. But while Emily was dealing with all of this, Steve was still carrying on his relationship with her and, unbelievably, was also looking for another woman who seemed to have money. Emily discovered this when she saw Steve's phone and found pages where he had applied to group dates with nurses and civil servants. Even Emily couldn't hold back her anger, and after a heated argument, the two of them broke up.
I did apply, but since I don't have the qualifications or education, I wasn't allowed to go on those group dates. So I didn't do anything wrong.
Steve tried to explain himself to Emily. If he had just stayed with Emily quietly, he wouldn't have ended up alone again, but now he was probably feeling lonely. As for Emily, after breaking up with Steve, she couldn't go back to her parents' house here. They wouldn't forgive her, and she could never see the children again. Michelle told me all of this with a mix of laughter.
Can you believe it? I heard from Emily's parents that they were really angry when they found out they broke up. Her dad said, "I never raised a daughter like that." But at least Emily's parents have decided to take responsibility and raise the kids. So there's some peace of mind there.
I was relieved to hear that, but I couldn't help worrying about John and Lucy. Thankfully, after hearing that from Michelle, I felt a bit of relief. Still, Steve kept trying to find high-spec women, while Emily could never shake her romantic tendencies. In this economy, with times so tough, I couldn't help but wonder how they were going to manage living properly. That was what worried me the most. Meanwhile, I was still fully immersed in my work at our company. In fact, the sales from the products we listed on online shopping sites had been so good over the past 4 years that our company, which had been running at a loss before, was now making a profit. Last year, we barely had a new hire, but this spring, 7 new graduates are joining the company. All of them were passionate about manufacturing and came in with bright eyes. I'm excited to see the future of the new employees, their eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Additionally, this spring, my father will step down from his position and become chairman, and I will take over as the new CEO. As I approach my late 30s, I haven't had much luck with marriage, but my company feels like family to me. Among the new employees, the high school graduates might even feel like my own children. Michelle's shop, which sells our company's products, is also doing well. She has 3 kids, and her youngest started kindergarten this spring. When she showed me the photo from the entrance ceremony, I noticed a familiar boy in the picture. That is John, who has just started kindergarten in the younger class. He was walking happily, holding his grandfather's hand. Behind them, there was also their grandmother, holding Lucy in her arms. It looks like they are being raised in a happy environment. As I smiled at the photo, Michelle teased me, saying,
"Susan, don't give up. There are plenty of guys out there."
I couldn't help but chuckle at that. But seeing how fulfilled Michelle is in both work and family, it made me think maybe I should start looking at things more positively. I've spent my life so far focused solely on work. But who knows what the future holds? If I live positively, something good will surely come my way eventually. As I thought about this, I looked up at the bright sky with a hopeful smile.